for my niece Sheila. Uh, when Sheila was 5 years old, they found a hole in her heart, and they had to go in and do some surgery on her. And she's been having these episodes for the last 2 or 3 months with her heart racing and her blood pressure dropping and stuff. But Sunday, I was anointed for her on her behalf. And Sunday morning, about the time that we were having prayer, her heart rate went up over 200. Her blood pressure fell real low. I think there was 2 doctors and some nurses in her room monitoring her, and they were getting ready to shock her. And we were having prayer, and she said that she felt like she was coming up out of her bed, and she seen Jesus, and said it was real bright, real white, and he told her that she just needed to rest, that she had 2 boys that she had to raise. She just needed to rest. And the monitor, the doctors was watching the monitor, and her heart rate was real high, her blood pressure was real low. And when we were having prayer, they said the doctors was watching that monitor getting ready to shock her, and all of a sudden, just like that, the monitor, all the numbers just changed. And said she went back into the bed. God's able. And actually, I was surprised that I could get through that, because every time I've told that, I've teared up. But, God's still the great physician. And, sometimes we doubt, but, and she told me, she said, you can tell that to anybody you want to. But so thankful that God's, took care of her. She's home. She got to come home yesterday. Her dad has got the flu. Our 2 boys have got pneumonia, so they're still having a battle. But you know what? God's still able. And but continue to pray. She's still got a long road to go. She's still got some issues that they've got some monitors on her to watch her heart and stuff. But they think that her surgery when she was 5, that the scar tissue and where they done the surgery is causing her heart to overcompensate because of a blockage. So it's still remember her and her family and stuff. But just give God all the glory, because it's through Him. So anybody got a prayer request? I know Brother Gary went down Tuesday and was supposed to have his scan today, but I've not heard from him, so let's remember Gary too. Okay. Remember that. And I ask you to remember Brother Ron tonight as he stands. I'm sure he deserves our prayers. Anyone else? If not, Brother Phil, would you come up and lead us tonight?
Come to this altar, God, and we'll bring our petitions to you. with us tonight, that you open our hearts, Lord, and get to receive the message, God, from all things, Father, that may apply to our lives. All these things we ask in the sweet name of Jesus Christ, our Savior. Amen.
Zach, I'm just going to put this down here. That's okay. Good evening. Good to be back in the Lord's house again. It's been a long while since we have stood and taught, and so please be in prayer as we kind of go through this tonight. I've been trying to catch up on exactly a lot of things that I'd like to say about this book, and there's a lot of leadership books that we have read and went through, a lot of leadership training. And I'm always glad to get a hold of one because I always want to learn something new. And this one is a good example of one of those books that you can take a little nugget here and there, and it can really make a difference not only in your professional life but in your personal life. So it's a good thing we're kind of going through these, and hopefully we can bring out what the Lord would have you learn out of the energy bus. So first of all, I'd like to kind of go through and kind of give you a review. It's working great. All right. So the energy bus is what we would call a fable. And a fable, I used to read a lot of them when the boys were smaller, and we used to tell, fairy tales or whatever you want to call them. But most of the time, they were good little stories and had like a meaning. Mike's not on. Everybody online's got a blessing. They don't have to hear me. How about now? Good. But a fable normally is like a normal story. It's an earthly story. And out of it, you'll learn something, some moral out of the story. And this is exactly that type of book. If those of you have read, little quirky books like Who Stole the Cheese, that's a pretty common leadership book that a lot of people, you can read that one in a day. It's that small, but it's really a story that has different characters. Each one of them has a particular lesson to teach our main focus. But in this book, in the energy bus, is a man named George, and George is an employee of a light bulb company. And they're actually getting ready to unveil one of their biggest products. Unfortunately, George is not doing very well. George is about to get fired. His boss has talked to him and said, I've really kind of backed you up a lot of different times, but I really can't cover for you anymore, George. And really, if I cover for you now, it's really bringing me down, and I've got to have a job. So, and you can definitely understand that. So his boss basically says, George, something's going to have to happen with your attitude here at work, and what's going to happen, or we're just going to have to let you go. The good part is when George goes home, everything's right. No, his attitude is carried over into his personal life. And even his wife has said, your attitude, you're always down, and really if it doesn't get any better, I'm going to leave you. We're going to have to get a divorce. So as you can imagine, George is not having a very good week. He's actually really struggling during this time. To make things worse, he comes out the next morning to go to work, and he finds that his tire has went flat. And as he reaches in to find a spare, it's also flat. And he kind of chagrins because his wife has told him multiple times, you need to get your spare checked. And of course he didn't. So now he really has to figure out a way to get to work. Well, all the cars are taken. There's so many things that the family's involved in. There's no way anyone can take George to work. So George says, listen, I will walk the 2 blocks, go down to the bus station, and I'll get on the bus and ride the bus to work. When he gets on the bus, of course, George is very down. He's very depressed. He's always, when he gets on, the bus driver is named Joy. Now, of course, Joy is very joyful. And, of course, If you're feeling down, the last thing you want is someone really in a good mood right in your face. And this is exactly what happens to George, but it gets George's attention. And on the bus, they have a sign, and it says, the 10 rules for the ride of your life. And it's 10 rules that everyone on the bus has adopted in their life and also in their personal life to increase their energy and their positive attitude. And it only has created a better environment for his work and his department, but also in their personal life. And even though George is reluctant, George kind of starts to want to hear more about him and wants to be a part of doing things better. He's getting ready to lose his job. He's getting ready to lose his marriage. I'm going to listen to the 10 rules and see how those go. Well, number one, the rule number one, and Brother TJ brought this out at last time, is you're the driver of the bus. Now, of course, this being a more secular book, there's no connotation that you are the driver. You are the purpose maker. And we, as a church, understand that the person who's driving our bus is Christ the Lord. He gives us the direction, and we are to kind of follow his example and his leadership. But we are responsible for our own choices. Brother TJ brought out the lesson of good or free will, that we all have the ability to make that decision of this is where the direction the Lord wants us to go, but are we going to make that decision or are we not? And most of the time, we may or may not. We like to make the right decision, and sometimes we do. He brought out a couple of verses, Philippians 2:12. He says, Wherefore, my beloved, as ye have always obeyed, not as in my presence only, but now much more in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. Paul's writing this letter to the church and saying, you did well when I was with you. We've set the direction as Christ has taught. Now when I'm leaving you, continue to make those choices. Continue to make that decision of going in one way or another. And always follow Christ. Mark 8:34 says, and this is Christ talking, when he had called the people unto him with his disciples also, he said unto them, Whosoever will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. And isn't that a daily decision? I think Brother TJ brought out that we should make that decision every morning. Have we died to Christ every day? And that's always a decision we need to make. And as we do, it becomes a consistent decision we make every day. Christ sets the direction. He's driving the bus. And he has set the vision. Brother TJ brought out this verse. This is one of my more favorite verses. This is one I like to use at work a lot. Proverbs 29:18, where there is no vision, the people perish, but he that keepeth the law, happy is he. So if we follow Christ's direction, his vision for us, what should that look like? Well, as a church, we are given the great direction to win souls for him, to spread the gospel to the other parts of the earth. And that's what we do and should decide to do each and every day. So, as Brother TJ dropped off at our last lesson on chapters, we start talking about vision. How that vision is determined, what that vision is for our church. Are we reaching out to the youth? Are we reaching out foreign missions, home missions? Those that are in our back door, who are we trying to reach? Are we trying to serve those within our own four walls? There are several visions and several needs that our church does each and every day. And how do we decide to make those visions? So hopefully we kind of gotten you up to speed on where we are in the book. So I get the benefit of going over Rule 2 and Rule 3 with you. And I will try to give you as much as I can as Brother TJ did. He's a wonderful teacher. But first I want to kind of borrow from another book. Hope you don't mind. I'm a big Stephen Covey fan. Do a lot of things with 7 Habits. And I really kind of determined Rule 2 is a lot like Stephen Covey's Begin with the End in Mind. habit. Stephen Covey says this. It says, to begin with the end in mind means to start with a clear understanding of your destination. It means to know where you're going so that you better understand where you are now, and so that steps you take are always in the right direction. So, let's do a little exercise. We used to do this a lot in some of our classes. But close your eyes and kind of envision yourself in a birthday party years from now. You have done a lot of things in your life, and people are getting up at your birthday party and want to say some good things about you. They want to say things of, he's always been a great mentor. She has always been there for me. They have shown me the way to salvation. They have taught me in children's church. They saw me come to Christ. They have done all these different things. So that would be our destination. That would be all the good things that we hear these people say. As you open your eyes, we are all sitting here in the sanctuary. Now, the question I have for you is, how do we reach that purpose or those destinations between where we're sitting now and to where those people say those actual things about you? What are the milestones? What are the steps we need to take? You know, back in the good old days before GPS, I know some of you may not believe there wasn't a GPS at one time. Sonia and I first got married, and the first thing we did was we bought a Rand McNally Atlas. And we used to get it out, and you used to sit down and say, okay, we're going to the beach. And you would say, okay, we're going to leave on US 23 South. We're going to take exit so-and-so. And inevitably, if you miss the exit, get the map back out. Where am I needing to turn around at? There wasn't anybody yelling at me saying, turn around, make a U-turn, dummy. What in the world? So you always had to have, what is that next milestone? What is that next decision? What is that next exit that you need to take? You know, life and our goals here at church are the exact same way. If we have a vision or a destination of reaching the youth, reaching those informed missions, what steps do we need to take now? May not be a big step, maybe little steps. Who can we identify that has a calling to reach certain populations? Maybe to reach out to them first. So those are the ways that we start with the end in mind. How do we want that to look in our destination, and what steps do we need to take? We say here, if we focus on our destination and goal, that is where our energy will be placed. And you know, Paul was one of the best to do this. Paul started many churches in the area, as far as Greece to Asia to wherever. But, you know, he always spread it in three different ways. He spread it in focus on the message of Christ, which he wrote to the churches continually, even when they would mess up, even when they would have setbacks. Paul would always go back and write back to the church about, here's what you need to be doing. The goal is this. Here's what you need to change, or here's where you need to make the decision. He always said to live the message of Christ, and this is how you do it, and spread the message of Christ as the church is there in that area. So, to make a biblical foundation or focus on the message, if someone can read Romans 15:5 for us, and we got right up there if you need it. Yeah, go ahead and do 6. Okay, so as a church, when Paul would sit and create churches and give them direction, he always started with a biblical foundation. This is focusing on the message of Christ. So this is the way that he wanted to go, is to focus on the message of Christ. It's a common direction. We knew that when the apostles, first in the early church, they did everything together. They ate together, they slept in the same areas, they combined their money. It was almost like a group that just depended on themselves. It was very tight-knit. So they had a focus, they had a one direction mind that this is what they were going to do as the church. And that's what Paul, and that's what we need as we want to do everything we need to do to reach God's goals for our church. Paul also says to live the message in our conduct. In Galatians 5:22, it says, "But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, patience, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. And they that are Christ have crucified the flesh with the affections and lusts." So how are we showing Christ? If we are to show a direction, if we are to fulfill Rule 2, that is what we need to do, is actually live out that direction and that goal. If that is our desire, if that's our vision, we're going to move our bus in the right direction, that's what we need to show. How many of you ever went to a church and everybody there is, well, been a bad day today. Let's get up and sing. And they sing the doxology. You're like, well, can there be a slower song? Is there joy? There's not a whole lot of joy in this place. Well, we should, happy is a condition. Being happy is one thing. But knowing that you're saved, that your sins are forgiven, that's joy. And there's a joy that should overcome us daily, that we are able to show Him or show others in our actions. If we were to spread the message of Christ, if everybody comes in and they're complaining and they're always down, I'm not sure if I'd want anybody to convince me to come to church. That'd be difficult, wouldn't it? So Paul says to his churches to show these fruits that you get when you accept Christ as your Savior. He also says that we should share Christ. It's Romans 10. If someone can read Romans 10, 13, and 14 for us. When I read this verse, I thought, this is exactly kind of the way that we are looking at this rule. Paul is saying our goal is to get individuals to hear the gospel, hear the message of Christ. But how can we do that if they haven't believed? And if they haven't believed, we need someone to share it with them. And if they haven't heard it, no one shared it with them, then how can they do it without someone being there to share it for? So that's what falls in with us. Our goal is that we are to share the message of Christ to everyone that we see, everyone that has a need. And if we don't become that person and we don't understand even ourselves how to lead someone, that is what Paul is saying here. How can they hear except they have someone to tell them? The next thing I think is also in our vision or in our goals is training the next church. And I think it's really good. I mean, I've been to churches all my life. I've always said I was on a drug program. Mom and Dad drugged me everywhere. I went to every church, everywhere. But there are some churches we go to, and there was definitely a minimum age. And it wasn't anywhere close to what I thought was me at the time. I feel very blessed to be here where we have a lot of youth, we have a lot of kids. Last time I taught children's church, we had 24 in just our class. And I think it's a blessing, even though it's really hard to keep them in one spot. We have found out that duct tape helps a whole lot. But I'm kidding. We don't duct tape them, just super glue. We do a lot of fun stuff back there. But we are blessed to have that number of kids in our church. And not only that amount, but also the teens and the young adults that we have here. It is a wonderful thing that we have. And you've heard this a lot, is that's the next church. And, unfortunately, I'm getting older. I'm finding myself, I used to think of myself as, a young adult. Well, I'm not a young adult anymore. And I'm finding I'm really older than I think I am. I find that out every weekend when I start doing things. But in doing that, we also need to train our young people, our young kids, to know the plan of salvation early on, to make those decisions in the youth of their life so they have a long time to serve the Lord. And Paul says this to Titus. Now, Titus is a small book in the New Testament, but Titus is one of those individuals you don't hear much about in the Bible, but followed Paul a lot in a lot of his travels. And actually, he would leave Titus behind to continue teaching the church, ordain deacons and other jobs to get the churches established. He writes to Titus in chapter 2 and says, "In all things showing thyself a pattern of good works and doctrine, showing uncorruptedness, gravity, sincerity, sound speech, that cannot be condemned, that he that is of the contrary part may be ashamed, having no evil thing to say of you." So as he continues to spread the law or the message of Christ, if you continue to say the right things, teach the right things to the youth, then they cannot have many items to stumble on. A good doctrine, teaching them a good doctrine, how to establish themselves as good Christians. And a lot of that has to do with us older men and women, is to actually take part in their life to show them what being a Christian family, being a Christian man and woman has to do. It talks about the law of attraction on page 42, and this kind of goes back to keeping the bus going the right direction. Page 42 says, the more we focus on something, the more we think about something, the more it shows up in our lives. And I am really bad at this. Usually when something goes wrong or I got something on my mind, I've had a very bad meeting, what is the first thing I do? I will dwell on it a good portion of the day. And that's due. I get up in the morning, I watch the news. If there's something bad on the news, gosh, that's really weighing on me. I'll be thinking about that. If there's disappointment, grievances that I really have a hard time kind of letting some of that go. But we attract what we put out. So if you're always down, you're always grieving, you're always dealing with something, you're not being that joyful person or showing the energy you should. So if we are attracting bad things, maybe we should turn that around. If we start thinking on what Christ has given us, what we have been blessed with, maybe those are the things that we should keep in our mind. Philippians 4:8 says, "Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things." And you find out if you do have, like me, a lot of different things that sometimes happen, if you start just being thankful, you wake up thankful, Lord, I could have been in the hospital today, or we could have been at the funeral home. I'm thankful that I was able to get up. Well, there's things going on at work I don't like. Well, Lord, thank you for giving me a job that I can come to. I can provide for my family. Will this happen or that happen? There's a lot of things to be thankful for. And as you become more thankful and you think about those different things, some of those problems start getting a lot smaller. You don't notice them near as much. You start saying, you know what, I got it pretty good, regardless of what happens. So that's how we're going to try to do Rule 2 and keep your bus in the right direction. Anybody having comments on Rule number 2? All right, let's look at Rule number 3. Rule number 3 is fuel your ride with positive energy. Now, we got the bus pointed in the right direction. We've got a rule that we're going to keep it in the right direction and how to keep it going. Now, how do we keep it moving down the road? And they gave a little equation in the book. It's E plus P equals O, which the events washed through our perceptions is our outcomes. And this is something like, well, I went to McDonald's and I ordered a quarter pounder, but what I got was chicken nuggets. Well, I perceived that that was not a good lunch because that was not what I ordered. So what is the outcome? Well, I could be saying, well, Probably didn't eat all that bread and all that fatty meat. Not that chicken nuggets are healthy. But, hey, I could have had that. Well, I could be upset. I didn't have my quarter pounder. I really wanted that quarter pounder. That mixture of cheese and bread and, yeah, it's good. But I got chicken nuggets. I could be upset. The outcome would not be good. Or I could say, well, that event happened. I didn't get it, but, maybe I didn't need to have it. And maybe I'm just going to enjoy what I've got. Then the outcome of that would be a lot better. Would be a whole lot better than me going off and not having a pleasant energy or pleasant outcome. Same thing happens with even weightier things in life. We deal with a lot of different things, and life gets messy a lot of times. There are events that happen in our life that sometimes we just have to change our perception of what it is. Most of the time, that's what happens. A lot of times we become worried about things, we hear about things, our perception is, listen, last time this happened, it was bad. We ended up in the hospital. And that outcome is not what I really wanted. But in every time that happens, it may or may not. So our perception of what may happen in an event really kind of changes the whole dynamic of how it's going to come out. Philippians 4:6 says, don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your request to God. There's a lot of things that happen, and sometimes our perception is to go to the darkest point of, oh my goodness, why in the world does this happen? We're going to have to do this, I have to do that. The outcome is always negative. But to be anxious about it, the Lord says, don't be anxious about it. Your perception is, I've got this. And I need to learn that a lot more, is when things happen, Lord, you're in control of this, not me. I've said this before, I'm a really good 2-year-old, and you've heard 2-year-olds when they were growing up, I can do it. They always want to do it. They always want to do, fix their own plate. They want to do this. They want to get dressed themselves. They come out with their pants on their head and all kinds of different stuff. I can be a really good 2-year-old. But God's looking at me just like I was a 2-year-old saying, you think you've got it. But, I've got a plan for you. I've got a direction you don't understand. And our perception should be, Lord, whatever these events are, you've got this. And I need to let this go. Romans 8:28 says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Does anybody have any comments? All right. So, what's fueling our work for Christ as a church? We got our direction, we got what our goals are wanting to be, what our destination is, and we need to fuel what it is. So in the book, it talks about an old fable, which we got a fable within a fable, and the fable of the two wolves kind of goes like this. And an old wise man is teaching his grandson about life, and the grandfather says, a fight is going on inside me, he said to the boy. It is a terrible fight, and it is between two wolves. One is evil. He is angry, envious. He has sorrow, regret. He's greedy. He's arrogant. He has self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority. He lies. He has false pride. He has a superiority complex. He has a large ego. Grandfather continued, and the other wolf, he's good. His joy, he's peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity. He has truth, compassion, and faith. He looks at his grandson and says, you know what? That same fight is going on inside of you and inside of every other person too. The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, so, which wolf will win? And the old wise man just simply replied, the one that will win is the one you feed. And that's the way we do each and every day. Which attitude do we feed the most? Do we feed the negative one? Do we feed the one that has all the issues going on? Worrying about what might happen next or what should have been done 20 years ago that the devil likes to bring up. We need to let those go, and we need to feed the attitude of the good wolf. Any comments? What's fueling our work for Christ is, like I said in the other part, being thankful. Colossians 3:15 says, "Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you are called to peace, and be thankful." Being thankful changes a lot of attitudes in everything that we do. And on page 48, Joyce says to George, and I really like this because I use it in a lot of other different ways too, says, where there's a void, negativity will fill it. So if you come in and there's a void of what type of energy or what type of direction, what type of push are we going, there's nothing going on, negativity will always fill it. Think about when the work is piled high on your desk. Think about how thankful you are even to have a job when so many are unemployed. Think about how you have the health enough to work. When sitting in traffic, be thankful you can drive a car while so many have to walk miles just to get clean water. We also need to surround ourselves with positive influences. Now, for me, this is one of the more positive influences I have in my life. When I can come and be with like-minded believers, we all have a common goal, a common purpose, is to worship our Lord and King Jesus Christ, that we can see others be saved and spread His word and do the work that God wants us to. There are several others. Gary and I were asked this question today. Do you have to be at church or come to church to be saved? Well, no. But as Hebrews 10:25 says, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much more as ye see the day approaching. If you have a need in your life, it is really good to come in here and tell others about it. I've got a prayer request. I have something you need to help me with, and this is the place to do it in. There's always a story of, well, if you go to a campsite, we've been in plenty of campsites, and the thing is, campsites are good as long as the fire's going. And if you've got a good fire going, you've got a lot of coals, a lot of heat, you can do a lot of cooking with it. There's always something you can do. But the good thing is you can take one of those coals away from the fire and set it to the side. That coal doesn't stay hot and orange. That coal will start getting darker and darker. But you can take it back and you can put it in the ring again, and it'll start glowing. It'll start heating back up. It's the same way we are. You can be saved and you can have a relationship, but being with like-minded believers, being with those that can support you and you can support them, that is when Christ's work does the best in your life. Any comments? Wonderful. Anyone else? All right. The next chapter. We never get up Sunday mornings. We never get up Sunday mornings and ask ourselves, are we going to church today? It was always are you sick? Are we dead? Are you bleeding profusely? Well, no, put a Band-Aid on it. Let's go. That's the way we used to be. One of the other chapters after the introduction to rule number 2 or rule number 3 is the one great golf shot theory. And this is the way I normally play golf when I used to play daily. And I don't play golf very well. And I don't really understand it. I only play like every 2 or 3 years. But every time I play, I'm not getting any better. It just goes bad. But inevitably, in those 18-hole rounds or whatever it may be, tee shots or whatever, I will normally do very badly in the entire game. I'm out there really, I just tell people, if you need something in the clubhouse, let me know. I'll go back and get it for you. But inevitably, there will be one shot. There'll be one good thing happen. Like, ooh, that was good. Before that, I was going to put everything on eBay and sell it. That's the way it was going to happen. But you have that one shot, you have that one thing, and you're like, you know what? I think I'll come back tomorrow. I think that was pretty good. The rest of the 17 holes was a train wreck. It was a dumpster fire. It was horrible. But that 18th hole, when I laid that shot up and I only did, a 4-putt, I was doing well. That was great. So you look at it and you really hang on to that one good thing. And in golf, that's how normally people get really addicted. They can start playing, and most of the time it's really bad because there's a lot of bad habits and a lot of things that happen. But if you have that one good shot, it's the one thing that really kind of changes your attitude the entire game. You've had people throw clubs in the woods, everything else, get to the end and say, I'll be back here tomorrow. So it's the same way with us. If we focus on the one success we had, or the one thing that we can say, God, I really worked in this area, and this was a good experience. This is a good thing we did. You really hold on to that. And I put in a little note here about the boys' home. And this was before the boys were born. I was the youth leader. I did teens in our church. And I had a good little group, and most of them were church kids. So you can imagine they all knew one another, and church kids are church kids. I was a church kid. I was a pastor's kid, a PK, which PKs are probably some of the worst. But in doing that, we had a great lesson every Wednesday, and we did talk sheets, and we had different studies. And we were I'm going to call it the beneficiary of the boys' home was just being established in Norton. And here you had some of the roughest boys in our area. They come from rough backgrounds. They had been in trouble. One of them actually even stole a wallet out of a lady's purse as everybody was standing to sing a hymn in our church. So you can imagine when they used to come on Wednesday nights. I used to have to, we would congregate on Wednesday night, and then we would dismiss the kids to go back to class. And every Wednesday, my job was to make sure, one, that I was prepared for class to teach, but that everybody in the boys' home section got up and was able to make it to class, or I would have some sneak out the back, and they'd be gone. Not really sure where they'd be. The deputies would pick them up later somewhere else. But we would teach, and we would share as much as we could. And we did talk sheets, and as much as the church kids were there, they really had a good background of, who Jesus was, what had happened, this Bible story. Oh, I know David, I know Goliath, I know. But here we had a group. I had about 4 or 5 boys from the boys' home. They didn't have that background. They didn't have what a lot of them had. But we continued to teach, and we continued to try to share. And I'll never forget, we was at a CTS conference. When we used to have CTS. And I can't remember if it was over at Wilson's Chapel. I think it was. And 2 of those boys went up front and accepted Christ as their Savior. And, I forgot all about all those crazy lessons we had. Where did so-and-so go? He went out the back door. Forgot all about that. And those are the stories I hang on to, or the one thing that you hang on to. It's the one shot on the 18th green that I go, Lord, that keeps me going. That keeps that fuel in the bus. I can continue going and do that for her. You know, every once in a while after that, I would see them. They got a job, and I'd see them at like Taco Bell or something working, and they would know me and they would see me. I really liked having them in there, even though a lot of times it's kind of scary. You didn't know what may happen, but I still hang on to that one night that, Lord, you helped us at that time. All right, now I'll finish up here. The work we perform as a church to fill the goals and the commission we're given can be hard. It is. Church work is hard. It's exhausting sometimes. It can be aggravating sometimes. But we must keep our destination in our mind and continue to remain positive even during those hard days. Does anybody have any comments? All right. I'm going to give some time back to you then. This is all we've got for tonight. I'm not sure who will take over the next rules. You've got 7 more to go, and I'm looking forward to the rest of this. I haven't read the rest of the book, Louise, but I'm hearing it's pretty good. I've read a lot of notes on it. So, does anybody have any announcements? I think Brother TJ's preaching Sunday morning, and got the Super Bowl coming up. So we'll be early. What, at 5:30? Jody, is that what we said? 5:30 on Sunday night. Remember the 4 going on a habitat group on Saturday. Keep them in your prayers. Anyone else? All right. Let's go ahead and stand. Brother Jody, will you dismiss us in prayer tonight?